Well, shalom and welcome back to Main Street. My good friend Robert Bobby Rechnitz is sitting with me. Want to know, well, where's Main Street? Well, that could be in Burbank, it could be in Scarsdale if you're watching us in Detroit or New Orleans, could even be in Give It Time or Ramat Gan. Every city has its Main Street, Bobby.
Absolutely.
Not that we're in every city at this time.
And certainly every city in Israel is a Main Street.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I know your ties and your love for Israel. But I want to talk about something now that you've developed that happens, I believe, annually, every year in Jerusalem.
Correct. That's the Jerusalem Conference. Took place this past year in February. This coming year in 2011, we're moving it until the end of January. And we're actually bringing two groups to Israel. We've got the Jerusalem Conference, which is shifting focus quite a bit this year. And then we have the leadership of the Reagan Legacy Foundation, led by Michael Reagan and, of course, Larry Greenfield, their executive director, and that's to take place in the end of March, and we'll be celebrating President Reagan's 100th birthday in Israel with a week long of festivities and ceremonies.
Okay, so why are you doing this?
At the end of the day, I believe that policy conferences and conferences where you bring together not only the Israeli electorate, but much of the American electorate representatives as well, I think in a way you can shape policy or influence policy that way. Don't forget that at the Herzliya conference several years ago, Ariel Sharon decided to announce the disengagement. He was clever enough not to take it to the Knesset or to the public first. It got an endorsement at the Herzliya conference where there are many leaders and attendees from around the world. And then after that, once he brought it to the Knesset, although it was a long fight to get approval, the last thing that he did is go for a referendum, which he never wanted to do. And he was able, in effect, to influence and shape policy the way that the media can influence a jury if they're allowed to listen to all the news about a case before they go in there and make the decision. And I felt the need to put together a conference that shows a little bit of balance. Herzliya is an outstanding model. They have a certain focus and a certain direction that they go in, which I respect very much, and I'm a participant there every year. And I felt there's a segment of society in Israel that's probably underrepresented. And that was the formation of this conference, which takes place in Jerusalem. And this year we'll be focusing more on Jerusalem than necessarily on the issues that affect Israel.
Now, my audience heard you say a underrepresented, a segment in Israel. Explain to us that segment.
The segment that we started with were most people to the right of center, many people that live in the so-called settlements, and settlement has become a sort of a dirty word in Israeli society where it should be the height and the pride of Israel, and many people whose views were possibly Likud or even further to the right to National Union. We've shifted to the center since then, not in terms of policy, because we don't have policy. We're strictly a forum for people to be represented, but we try to bring a lot of good American representation from the House, from the Senate, in terms of leaders, committee leaders. Howard Berman, who couldn't make it last year, received a special award together with Ilyana Ros-Lehtinen for their sponsorship of the Goldstone Amendment, which took place on November 3rd. In Washington at the Senate, when we were in the same Hart Office building at the Senate hosting our Jerusalem conference in Washington. This is just open to all aspects of society. We have speakers from the left, Tzipi Livni, we have speakers from the right, from National Union. There's no one who isn't welcome at this conference, and there's no political view that isn't welcome at this conference, because we believe that it begins with dialogue, as long as both sides understand that there's always another view.
Okay, so now many of our viewers may not be cognizant or be able to relate to the levels of, or the labels in a sense, that you've assigned groups to. For instance, how could you define then left, center, and right? I know you mentioned right of center, for example, but what does that mean? And define it so we, as an audience,
That's
knows.
a tough definition, because I would say that today's left may have been yesterday's right. Things have shifted so much in Israel.
Absolutely, because of the terrorism especially.
Absolutely.
The left almost dissolved itself.
Right. The left in society was were the aspects of society that felt that Oslo was a success, that Israel must trade land for peace, that obviously, like the rest of the country, is tired of seeing their children fight in wars and wants to see peace. But their approach at going about it wasn't necessarily an approach of strength. And strength has always worked for Israel historically and has always worked for Jews historically. And instead they used appeasement. And appeasement doesn't work when you have an enemy that wants to wipe you off the face of the earth. So the left has sort of, as you say, disappeared because after the disengagement, the left's argument was lost. Israel unilaterally vacated families and land and factories and businesses and homes and synagogues in exchange for peace. The front for the ammunition just moved forward those 8 miles into the areas that were once occupied by the Jews or once settled by the Jews. I don't like the word occupation at all. And that became the front line for firing rockets into Sderot. And I think what that did is that disillusioned those people who were on the left who felt that appeasement and negotiation and rewarding them with financial rewards would make the difference. So this shows you that the center is starting to disappear because the left and right are coming a little bit closer together because they're realizing that they need to stick to Israel's core values in Jewish history if they're to survive. Because after all, we are a Jewish country. Israel is a Jewish country. And Jerusalem is the heart and soul of that country. And if Jerusalem is never to be on the bargaining table, it will only be from this generation and future generations appreciating the good education that they received and understanding its importance. That has been lost on the last couple of generations in Israel.
Now, we have some information on the screen on how people can register and get involved in your Jerusalem conference. And while they're writing all that down, getting ready to send emails and so forth, I have one question for you in closing. I think I know the answer, but what propelled you, Robert Rechnitz, known as Bobby to me, to do what you're doing? What gave you the momentum? Let's see if...
You know the answer, because probably 20 years ago, we were sitting at it was a founding of the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, and they came out to the Century Plaza for a weekend, and we were discussing at that time, I believe, comparing monuments and museums to Jewish education. My parents were survivors. They wanted to move to Israel after the war. They decided to come to the United States. My father had a sister who was one of the founding members of Kibbutz Dagan Yabet. She made Aliyah in 1938. My mother had a brother who was one of the founding members of Mishmar HaSharon, and then later he became a Chaver Eged, and he moved to Israel in 1938. As a matter of fact, the only photos that my cousins, my brother, my cousins, and myself have of any family are those photos that they took with them before the war. And I always believed, and as they did, had there been a state of Israel at that time, the Holocaust never could have happened, because Israel is what makes Jews strong around the world. And I believe that many Jews today that have access to politicians or access to the White House, they take it for granted that the only reason they have that access is because Israel made them. They didn't make Israel. We American Jews are not doing Israel any favors by helping them. It's an obligation, our duty. Israel's helping us. And that's the way that I was brought up. I feel that we need to keep Israel going as long as we can, because as Jews, that's all we have. And nothing says that you can't be a great American, live in this fantastic country, but at the same time ensure the success and the security of Israel. And I believe that it's passed through the generations.
Thank you, Robert.
My pleasure.
And I knew the answer. Yes, you're right.
Yes, of course.
And the answer is Bobby's parents were survivors. So as second generation, he carries this commitment, and you're blessed.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more. We're going to sing about Jerusalem next with the Moran Choir. Stay tuned.